Welcome, all true crime enthusiasts, to another episode of The Dark Place. I'm your host, Adam, and today we're going to be diving into a chilling case that has left this one community bewildered and questioning the boundaries of human morality. Join me tonight as we explore the case of Antonio Barbeau and Nathan Paape. But before we dive into the case, please check out all of our social media pages at Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. On with the show. So our story begins in the quiet town of Green Bay, Wisconsin, where the lives of its residents were forever changed by a gruesome crime. Antonio Barbeau, a name that would soon send shivers down the spines of those who heard it, was just 14 years old before he became the center of a tragic tale. It was a crisp fall morning when the small town woke up to the shocking news. Antonio Barbeau and his friend Nathan Paape had brutally murdered Paape's great-grandmother, Barbara Olson. The details of the crime were gruesome, and the community struggled to comprehend how two seemingly ordinary teenagers could be capable of such heinous acts. Antonio and Nathan meticulously planned the murder, inspired by a combination of dark fantasy and a desire for money. The motive was revealed as they confessed to the authorities that they intended to use the stolen funds to run away and live a life of crime. But what drove them, these two young boys, to commit such a horrific act against Paape's own family member, great-grandmother? As this case unfolded, the courtroom began to become a stage for a psychological examination of the young criminals. Attorneys argued whether Antonio and Nathan should be tried as adults or juveniles due to their age. The community grappled with questions about the influence of media, mental health, and the moral compass of today's youth. The brutal murder of 78-year-old great-grandmother Barbara Olson, who was hacked to death and bludgeoned with a various hammer and hatchet. Antonio and Nathan, two of the teenagers, were accused of killing the elderly lady, and they were sentenced to life in prison with the eligibility of parole in 36 years. Nathan and Antonio were charged with a first-degree intentional homicide by killing 78-year-old Barbara Olson, who happened to be Antonio's great-grandmother. On that fateful afternoon of September 17th, 2012, Nathan's mother drove the two boys to a familiar destination. As they approached the house and got out, they said goodbye to Nathan's mother, and when she drove out of sight, they snuck quietly into Barbara's garage. They had intended on sneaking up on Barbara through the door, which came up through the garage and into the kitchen. However, Barbara heard the two teenagers, saw the boys, and invited them inside, also saying that she would call Antonio's mother to say, hey, the boys got here, they're in safe hands, not to worry. So when Barbara turned her back on Antonio and Nathan, she was attacked by the two boys. They had also brought along their weapons of choice, which happened to be a hammer and a hatchet. They hit, smash, and cracked open her head with the blunt edge of the hatchet and the steel hardness of the hammer. The grandmother fell down to the floor, crying, groaning, wailing, "Stop! Stop! Stop!" But the boys didn't stop. They continued. And then they tried to drag her body to the car, which was parked in the garage. They discovered, we can't do this. This is not as easy as I thought. They just decided to leave the body there, laying, lifeless, bloodied, in the garage. All that they took was a mere $155. That's all they could take from Barbara. And they took several little items like necklace, bracelet, rings. So they grabbed Barbara's car. After that, they grabbed Barbara's car keys and dumped her unlocked car at a bowling alley that was nearby. Inside the car, they left the jewels and the rings and the necklaces that they had taken in hopes that somebody would steal the unlocked vehicle and be, pretty much they were hoping that they were going to leave this car. Somebody would find it or be, linked to it, take the jewels and be charged with the murder of Barbara, in which they committed. What they did is with $155 that they took from Antonio's great-grandmother, they went to the pizzeria, had some pizza, and they bought some marijuana. After they just killed and murdered, brutally murdered. The daughter was said to, if she had been able to see what her mother looked like, she would have had nightmares she would have had nightmares endlessly. It was that brutal. It took off the top part of her head. It would be a few days later when Barbara's body was found. Her daughter Judy drove out and went to Barbara's house after she didn't answer her phone calls for a couple days. She looked inside the garage window and she saw that the car was gone, but when she was walking away, she happened to notice that Barbara's body was laying on the ground, and there happened to be blood everywhere. Within discovering this, she called the authorities, and within hours, Nathan and Antonio would be charged. Well, they wouldn't be charged, but they would be arrested. After certain evidence, bloody clothes, the shoes were discovered in a locker that belonged to Antonio. So pretty much the daughter had been trying to call, no response, no answer. She just decides to drive over. No response. She sees the car is gone, but as she's walking away back to her car, that's when she happens to discover the body. Imagine that, going through that. And not only discovering the body, but a few days later learning it was her great grandkids that had done this to her. The two teens would be charged as adults due to the planning of the murder and how horrific it was. In January of 2013, Antonio entered a plea of not guilty by mental disease or defect. A few weeks later, Nathan Paape also entered the plea of not guilty. The case of Antonio Barbeau raises the questions about the responsibility of society to identify and address warning signs in the troubled youth. Were there missed opportunities to intervene? Or was this were there missed opportunities to try to intervene with these two? I'm sure there were. There always seems to be. In some cases, not. And I've not been able to dig up a lot of information about the past history, but what I can find is that there was no really real reason to be alarmed by these two. As they're in jail now. Now Antonio, which is kind of interesting, if you type in Antonio Barbeau, you are able to be a pen pal back and forth. And it's been some time since the murders. He was 14 when this occurred, so it's been 10 years, so he's 24 years old. And how has his mind changed from that being a 14-year-old person that's murdered his great-grandmother, being incarcerated and in facilities for 10 years, and reaching out to those that want to correspond. I really don't know what else to say about this case. I'd heard about this case maybe a couple years back, maybe about a year and a half ago. And it always intrigues me that a lot of these cases, most of these cases when there are teen murderers, not people that have teens that shut up schools, but the murderers or the killers often kill almost every time people that they know. Family members, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, best friends' families. It's rarely ever a stranger. Is it the delusion of these teens that they think they're smart enough to get away with murder? Do they think in their mind that they're able to recreate what they've seen in a video game or on another TikTok video or in a movie screen? Does cinema and media have that much power to influence a young mind? I'm sure they do. But it's hard for me to believe that any logical thinking teenager would dismiss killing another human being as something not punishable by being incarcerated. What is their plan? Do they really think they're able to get away and Bonnie and Clyde this thing out? Do they think they're able to get away with murder and plan it and get away? And do they fall short due to the fact they're just young, immature? Had they got away with others as well, will they continue on this course of carnage, devastation? Who's to say? Who's to say? But if you have any thoughts, questions, or insights on this case, or any suggestions for future cases, please message us at virginiarunning@gmail.com or the Other People Show at Gmail. And join us again as we continue to unravel several new cases, new topics, and new things in the new year. Until then, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the complexities of the human mind. Until next time, The Dark Place. Have a good night.